My name is Veyra Hollis, though my mother stopped saying Hollis the year she married Russell Vale. I was 34 the night he told me I had no right to come home, not after everything this family had already carried for me. He said it in my mother's kitchen, under the same warm yellow light where I had once waited as a child for someone to notice I was still awake. I had come back to Maine with 2 suitcases, $73 in checking, and 9 years of bank transfers behind me. I believed I had been helping my mother survive. I believed every check I sent had gone toward her treatments, the house payments, and the Salt Lantern Inn, the old seaside place my grandmother had loved more than anything our family owned. I believed Russell when he said the inn would be lost without me. I believed Celeste when she whispered, "Just a little longer, honey, we're almost through it." I believed Sabrina when she cried about sacrifice while posting pictures from rooms I later learned my money had helped renovate. For almost an hour, I sat at that kitchen table while they talked around me like I was a problem they had not agreed to solve. My mother stirred sugar into tea she never drank. Sabrina kept looking at her phone, the diamond on her finger catching the light every time she moved. Russell leaned back in his chair with the calm of a man who had already decided what I deserved before I ever walked through the door. Nobody asked how I had lived those 9 years. Nobody asked about the double shifts, the small rented room in Boston, or the holidays I missed because another transfer had gone out the morning. Then my mother asked how long I planned to stay. She said it softly, but it was not a welcome. It was a warning wearing a gentle voice. I told her I had not made a plan yet. My job at the rehabilitation center had ended when the company changed owners, and my lease had ended the same week. I had not come to be carried. I had come because I thought I had already been carrying them, and maybe there would be one chair left for me when I finally got tired. Russell looked at my suitcases by the door and set down his fork. "You can't stay here, Vera. Not this time," he said. "Your mother has enough stress. Sabrina has the inn opening to think about. We have all done what we could for you." That last sentence confused me more than the rejection. Done what they could for me. I looked at Celeste, waiting for her to correct him, waiting for one small sign that she remembered the money, the calls, the promises, the years. But my mother lowered her eyes to her tea, and Sabrina looked away. I asked where the money had gone, not loudly, not with anger. Just one question, placed carefully in the middle of the table. Celeste went still. Sabrina stopped touching her phone. Russell smiled a little, and that smile was the first crack in the story I had believed for 9 years. "That money kept this family alive," he said. "Don't come back here acting like you were the only one who suffered." I told him I had never said I was the only one. I only wanted to understand how the inn was still in trouble after 9 years of payments. I wanted to understand how my mother's medical bills were still drowning them after I had sent almost everything I could. I wanted to understand how Sabrina's new event rooms looked like something from a magazine, while I had been told the roof was one storm away from falling into the sea. Sabrina made a small sound then, not quite a laugh and not quite a gasp. "You always do this," she said. "You make normal family help sound like some kind of crime." Normal family help. I had worked nights with a fever. I had ignored my own bills. I had lived so small that my family could live bigger and still call it survival. But to Sabrina, my sacrifice was not sacrifice. It was just something expected, like rain. Russell's voice changed after that. The softness left it. "You have always had a talent for making yourself the victim," he said. "Your mother has been sick for years. This family has been under pressure for years. Sabrina stayed. Sabrina helped. Sabrina gave this family a future. And now you walk in here asking for receipts like we stole from you." Celeste finally lifted her head, and for 1 second I thought she might speak the truth. Instead, she said, "Vera, this is not the night for this." That was my mother's gift. Not truth, not denial, just a soft cloth placed over anything sharp. I stood up slowly because I did not want Russell to see me shake. I picked up my suitcases. Sabrina looked relieved before she remembered to look hurt. Russell stayed seated. "Sending money does not give you the right to control this family," he said. I looked at him then, really looked at him, at the pressed shirt, the careful hair, the watch I had seen in one of Sabrina's dinner photos. I said, "No," but lying about where it went might. The room went quiet enough for me to hear the refrigerator click off. Russell's face did not change, but his eyes did. That was when I knew something was hidden. Not the whole truth yet. Not the size of it, but enough to know that my question had touched a locked door. Outside, the November rain had turned the driveway black. I stood beside my old car with both suitcases in the mud and did the math because numbers have always been easier than feeling. I had $73 in checking, half a tank of gas, no apartment, no job, and a family who had just told me my usefulness had expired. The money that should have given me a month to breathe was gone. It had left my account in neat transfers with notes like mom medicine, roof repair, in tax, emergency. I had written those notes myself because I wanted the sacrifice to feel meaningful. There was one person left in town I had not called in years. Aunt Lenora was my mother's older sister, though Russell had made her sound like a bitter old woman who liked trouble more than family. She lived near the harbor, in a gray house at the end of a narrow road. When I was a child, she had worked at the Salt Lantern Inn with my grandmother and knew every family story before Russell cleaned it up. Her porch light was swinging in the wind when I knocked. I expected anger. I expected questions. Instead, she opened the door in wool socks and a faded blue sweater, looked at my suitcases, then at my face, and said, "Veyra Hollis, you look like a woman who has finally run out of places to pretend she's fine." I told her Russell had asked me to leave. I told her I had nowhere else to go. Lenora stepped aside before I finished. "Bring the bags in before the rain keeps them," she said. Her house smelled like coffee, old books, and wood smoke. She put soup in front of me and sat across the table without asking too many questions. That kindness nearly broke me more than Russell's cruelty had. I ate a few spoonfuls before my throat closed. Lenora watched me push the bowl away and said, "Did he finally tell you the money was none of your business?" I looked up. She nodded once, like she had been waiting years for that sentence to reach her kitchen. "Russell always did hate questions he didn't write himself," she said. I asked what she knew. She asked me how much I had sent. I told her I did not know exactly without records, but maybe 160,000 over 9 years, maybe more. Lenora closed her eyes. "For Celeste's treatments?" she asked. I said yes. "For the inn?" she asked. I said yes again. When she opened her eyes, her voice was quiet. "Your mother had bills, Veyra. I won't lie about that, but not like they told you. After the first year, Russell's insurance covered most of it. There were gaps, but not 9 years of your life. The first thing you do when the truth hits is reject it." I told her she had to be wrong. I told her Russell had sent screenshots, balance notices, pictures of repairs, even a photo of the inn roof covered with a tarp. Lenora gave a small, bitter laugh. That roof was fixed with insurance money after the storm. Russell took credit for a check that was never his. I sat very still. Some people shake when they are close to breaking. I go quiet. I asked about the inn because there were too many lies to hold at once, and I needed to choose which one to face first. Lenora looked toward the window where rain slid down the glass. "The Salt Lantern was never in foreclosure the way he told you," she said. "There were repairs, there were taxes, old buildings eat money, but your grandmother left protection around that place. Russell just made sure you never saw it." Then she stood and went to the hall closet. She moved 2 coats and pulled down a rusted tin box. When she set it on the table, my name was written on the lid in my grandmother's careful handwriting. "For Veyra," when she asked the right question. Inside the box were envelopes. The first held a photograph of my grandmother and me, standing in front of the Salt Lantern Inn when I was 11. On the back, she had written, "This one knows how to listen to a house." The second envelope held insurance letters. Paid, covered, adjusted, dates I recognized because I had sent emergency money during those same months. The third envelope held legal paper. I saw my full name before I understood the sentence around it. Veyra Elise Hollis. My name sat in the middle of a paragraph about ownership, management, and the Salt Lantern property. My grandmother had not left the inn fully to Celeste. She had not left it to Russell. She had divided it carefully, with rules. Celeste could benefit from it. Russell could help manage it only under conditions. Sabrina could work there, but she did not own it. And I had been given a protected share and future management rights if the inn was ever renovated, refinanced, sold, or turned into an event business. I looked at Lenora, and my voice did not sound like mine when I asked why I had never seen it. "Because Russell became the man in the doorway," she said. "Mail went through him. Calls went through him. Your mother let him handle everything because she was tired, then because she was scared, then because it was easier to call fear loyalty. I thought about every transfer, every late shift, every call where Russell said they needed just a little more, and underneath all of it was one colder thought. Russell had not thrown me out because I was broke. He had thrown me out because I had come home in person. A transfer can be controlled. A daughter at the table can ask questions. Lenora closed the box and pushed it toward me. This is not revenge, Veyra, she said. Revenge is when you burn the house down because they locked you out. This is finding the deed and learning the house was never only theirs. Near dawn, I came downstairs and found Lenora already awake. She placed one more envelope on the table, one she had not shown me the night before. My name was written across it in my grandmother's hand. Under it were 5 words that made the whole room go still around me. Do not let Russell sell. I read those 5 words again and again until they stopped feeling like a sentence and started feeling like a warning. Do not let Russell sell. My grandmother's handwriting was calm, but the message was not. Aunt Lenora stood across the table with her coffee untouched, watching me understand what she had probably understood for years. I asked her what Russell was trying to sell, and she answered without dressing it up. The inn, she said, or the land under it, maybe both. Developers have been circling that road for 2 years. Russell smiles when money gets close. The envelope held a short letter from my grandmother, a property notice, and the name of an old attorney. Pearl Hollis had written that the Salt Lantern Inn was not just a building. It was the one place in our family that had made room for tired people, lost people, and people running from storms. She wrote that Celeste was kind but weak when someone stronger stood too close. She wrote that Russell's hunger always came dressed as responsibility. Then she wrote my name and told me to ask questions before anyone called me selfish for asking. By 9 that morning, Lenora drove me to the coast road. I did not ask to see the inn, but she took me there anyway, because some truths need a building around them before paper can explain them. The salt lantern stood above the water. White walls, blue shutters, and a porch wrapped around the front like folded arms. I had not stood there in 6 years. The old sign had been freshly painted. Under Salt Lantern Inn, in small gold letters, someone had added, Private Coastal Events by Sabrina Hayes. I stared at Sabrina's name until my chest went cold. She had told me the inn was barely surviving. Russell had told me the roof was weak, the taxes were late, and the whole place could be lost by winter. But the porch was new. The windows were new. A white ceremony arch stood near the lawn, facing the sea. This was not a dying inn. This was a business being dressed up with money I had sent for medicine and emergencies. Lenora parked by the side kitchen door. We did not go inside because she said Russell would turn that into a story, and I was already learning that every step had to be clean. I touched the door frame and remembered my grandmother standing there with flour on her hands, telling me that houses remember who loved them and who only counted their rooms. A foghorn sounded from the harbor, low and steady. When I was young, that sound scared me. That morning, it felt like the inn itself was calling my name back. After that, we went to Pike and Wilder, a small brick law office near the post office. Arnold Pike had retired, but Jude Wilder handled property records now. He was quieter than I expected, with rolled-up sleeves and eyes that did not rush. He read my grandmother's papers twice before speaking. Your grandmother was careful, he said. If this copy matches the original file, then you have a protected interest in the inn. Russell had no right to keep you uninformed if the property was being renovated, refinanced, sold, or converted into another business. I asked if Russell had broken the law. Jude leaned back slightly. Maybe not in the clean way people expect. Families are very good at making theft look like misunderstanding. But paper has a longer memory than people. That sentence stayed with me. Paper has a longer memory than people. Jude told me to collect bank records, messages, transfer notes, and anything Russell had written about needing money. I had all of it. 9 years of texts, 9 years of excuses, 9 years of emergency requests saved in a phone I had kept because some quiet part of me had always wanted proof that my sacrifice meant something. By noon, my phone started ringing. First my mother, then Sabrina, then Russell. I watched their names appear one after another and did not answer. Russell left a voicemail. His voice was warm at first. the voice he used when other people might hear him. He said my mother was upset, that Lenora had always enjoyed turning women against family, and that I should come back so we could talk like adults. Then his voice changed. "And do not go near the inn without speaking to me first," he said. "You do not understand the arrangements." Arrangements. That was the word that told me he knew exactly what he had done. Not mistakes, not confusion, arrangements. Lenora told me to save the voicemail, so I did. For the first time since I had come home, I did not feel like I was begging for truth. I felt like truth had started walking toward me on its own. That afternoon, I sat at Lenora's kitchen table and opened my bank records. The transfers came back month by month, neat and cruel. Mom treatment, roof repair, in tax, Sabrina deposit, emergency. I had written those notes myself because I wanted the money to have meaning. Now every note looked like a hand reaching into my life. Russell had not stolen with a weapon. He had stolen with family language, with my mother's tears, with Sabrina's helpless little messages after the money arrived. Near evening, Dean Quinn knocked on Lenora's back door. I had not seen him properly in years. He looked older, thinner, and nervous in the way people look when they have carried a truth too long. He held a bakery bag like an apology. When Lenora let him in, he looked at me and said, "Russell knows you went to Pike and Wilder. He's telling people you came back broke and started making claims." There it was, the new story, broke. Jealous, confused, difficult. Words people use when the truth arrives before they can lock the door. I asked Dean why he had come. He looked down at the table and said, "Because I saw the contractor invoices last year. Sabrina's event hall, the bridal suite, the deck lights. Russell said the money came from a private investor, but the dates were always right after you sent money." The room went quiet. Dean told us he had helped paint the bridal suite. He had picked up supplies from stores where Russell had accounts. He had once seen my name on an old file in Russell's office and been told never to touch that drawer again. He said he had not understood enough then. I thought maybe he had understood more than he wanted to admit. But fear can make honest people slow. I did not forgive him right there. Forgiveness is not a chair you pull out for someone just because they arrive ashamed. But I believed him. That night, after Dean left, I stood on Lenora's porch and looked toward the dark line of the coast. Somewhere beyond it, the salt lantern sat above the water, with Sabrina's name painted under its sign. Yesterday, I had arrived with 2 suitcases and a story my family had written for me. Now that story was starting to tear at the seams. My phone buzzed once more. A text from Russell. No greeting, no softness. "You have no idea what your grandmother really wanted." I looked back through the window at the tin box on Lenora's table, at the papers beside it, at the first small proof that my family had tried to bury. Then, I put the phone face down and did not answer. Russell had used my words for 9 years. From that night on, he was going to have to live with my silence. The next morning, I woke up before the sun and found Lenora already at the kitchen table with a yellow legal pad, 2 pens, and the kind of face people wear when they have decided kindness is no longer enough. She had written 4 words at the top of the page: money, paper, witnesses, motive. "Feelings are real," she said, sliding the pad toward me. "But Russell won't fall because you were hurt. He'll fall because he left a trail." I sat down across from her with coffee I could barely taste and started making the first clean list of my life. For 9 years, I had sent money whenever they called it urgent. That word had been the door. Urgent made me skip questions. Urgent made me feel selfish for needing groceries. Urgent made my mother's voice shake and Sabrina's messages turn sweet. I wrote down every reason I remembered: mom treatment, roof repair, window replacement, tax lien, insurance gap, Sabrina vendor deposit, emergency plumbing, winter heating. Some of the words were mine, some were Russell's. All of them had become little hooks in my bank account. By noon, Jude Wilder called and said he had found the original estate file. His voice was calm, but something in it had changed. "Your grandmother's copy matches the file," he said. "And there's more. Russell signed several management acknowledgments after Pearl died. He knew you had rights connected to major changes at the inn." I held the phone tighter. "So he didn't forget," I said. Jude was quiet for 1 second. "No," he said. "He documented that he remembered." It was a strange thing, learning that a person had not betrayed you by accident. Accident leaves room for grief. Intention leaves only weather. Jude told me not to go to the inn alone. Lenora agreed before I could argue. By 3 that afternoon, the three of us stood on the gravel lot behind the salt lantern, while the ocean wind snapped at our coats. Jude had brought copies of the paperwork, and Lenora had brought the expression that once made a plumber apologize for charging my grandmother twice. Russell was not there. Sabrina was. She came out through the side door wearing white jeans, a cream sweater, and the face of a woman who had never expected the past to arrive with a folder. "What are you doing here?" she asked, looking at Jude first, because men with papers scared her more than sisters with feelings. Jude told her we were there to inspect areas connected to Veyra's ownership interest and renovation rights. Sabrina blinked twice. "Ownership interest?" she repeated, like the words had a bad smell. I watched her understand that this was not a sad sister visit. This was paper walking through the door. Inside, the inn looked beautiful, in the way stolen things can look beautiful when enough money is spent on them. The old breakfast room had been painted pale blue. New lights hung over the long table. The front parlor, where my grandmother used to keep guest books and peppermint candies, had been turned into a bridal consultation room with velvet chairs and gold mirrors. Everywhere I looked, there were upgrades I had been told were impossible, and emergencies I had been told were desperate. I touched the back of one velvet chair and thought about the winter I had worked 6 12-hour shifts in a row because Russell said the furnace had failed. Sabrina followed us with her arms crossed. "Dad handled all of this," she said. "I don't know why you're acting like I did something wrong." I turned to her then. "Not fast. Fast would have made it too easy for her to become the victim." "Did you know the money was mine?" I asked. Her face changed in a small way, not enough for a stranger to catch. But I had known Sabrina since she was 5. "Family money is family money," she said. And there it was again. The sentence people use when they have spent something that was never offered to them. In the bridal suite upstairs, Dean met us by the door. He looked like he wanted to disappear into the wall. He had agreed to show us what he knew, and courage did not fit him comfortably yet. The room was soft and expensive, all white curtains, brass lamps, and a sea view wide enough to make people forget what they paid. Dean pointed to the built-in cabinets, the bathroom tile, the balcony doors. "These came in last spring," he said quietly. "Russell said an investor paid cash, but the supplier invoice had the same date as one of your emergency transfers. I remember, because Sabrina was mad the vanity was delayed." I did not cry. I did not shout. I simply stood in the middle of that beautiful room and felt 9 years of my life pass through it like cold air. This was what my fever shifts had bought. This was what my missed birthdays had bought. Not medicine, not survival. A room for brides to stand in front of a mirror and feel chosen. There are moments when anger does not come as fire. It comes as clarity, and clarity is colder. Jude photographed invoice numbers Dean remembered and asked Sabrina for access to the renovation file. She said Russell kept it. Jude wrote that down. Lenora walked to the window and looked out at the sea lawn where the white ceremony arch stood against the gray sky. "Pearl would have hated that thing," she said. Sabrina's mouth tightened. "Grandma wanted this place to succeed." Lenora turned slowly. "Your grandmother wanted this place to welcome people. She did not want it dressed up like a rich girl's apology." That was when Sabrina finally lost the soft act. She looked at me and said, "You left. You don't get to come back and judge what we had to do." I almost answered the way she wanted. I almost told her that leaving was what I had done, so I could earn the money they asked for. But I had learned something in the last 2 days. Some arguments are traps with chairs around them. So I said only, "I'm not here to judge. I'm here to count." On our way out, I stopped in the front hall. The brass lighthouse lamp was still hanging inside the cupola window above the stairs, dusty but whole. Russell had told me it was sold. Another small lie, almost silly beside the larger ones, but it landed deeper than it should have. My grandmother used to light that lamp during storms. She said people needed to know someone was keeping watch. I looked up at it and felt, for the first time, not comfort exactly, but direction. That evening, Jude sent me a scanned copy of the original will and 2 signed acknowledgments with Russell's name at the bottom. Lenora printed them because she liked paper she could touch. Dean texted me 3 supplier names and apologized 5 times in 6 lines. My mother called twice. I did not answer. Then she sent a message that said, "Please don't make this harder than it already is." I stared at those words for a long time. Harder for whom, I wanted to ask. For the woman who had been lied to, or for the people who had enjoyed the lie until it got expensive? I slept at Lenora's again and dreamed of the inn in a storm. Not a nightmare. Not exactly. I was standing in the old front room while water climbed the windows, and my grandmother's lamp kept burning above the stairs. In the dream, Russell was outside knocking, telling me the house was his, telling me I owed him the key, but the door did not open. When I woke, the foghorn was sounding from the harbor, low and steady, and I understood what my body had been trying to tell me all night. The next morning, I drove to the bank and ordered full records for every transfer I could still access. Then I went to the post office and asked about old forwarding addresses connected to the inn. It was not dramatic work. No one gasped. No one confessed. It was boring, slow, humiliating work, the kind real truth usually requires. Receipts, dates, names, copies. Every paper said a little. Together, they were beginning to speak. By late afternoon, Russell came to Lenora's house. He did not knock softly. He hit the door with the side of his fist like a man trying to remind Wood who owned the world. Lenora opened it with the chain still on. I stood behind her in the hall. Russell saw me and smiled without warmth. "This has gone far enough," he said. "You're upsetting your mother, you're embarrassing Sabrina, and you're letting a bitter old woman fill your head with stories." Lenora's voice was calm. "Funny thing about stories, Russell. The good ones come with documents." His smile vanished for half a second. Then he looked at me. "You think papers make you family?" he asked. I thought about the kitchen, the suitcases, the rain, the lamp, the bridal suite, the years of money leaving my hands. "No," I said, "but they make me harder to erase." He stared at me then, really stared, like he was meeting someone he had not planned for. For years, I had been useful from a distance. Quiet, guilty, easy to reach, and easier to direct. Now I was standing in a hallway with my grandmother's papers behind me, and my name no longer sounded like something he could spend. Russell stepped back from the door. "You'll regret this," he said. He meant it as a threat. I heard it as a forecast from a man who had always mistaken fear for weather. Lenora closed the door before I could answer. The chain shook once, then went still. That night, I added one more word to the top of Lenora's yellow legal pad. Under money, paper, witnesses, motive, I wrote pressure. Because that was what Russell would use next. Pressure on my mother, pressure on Sabrina, pressure on the town, pressure on me. But pressure does not only crush things, sometimes it shows you what they are made of. The pressure started the next morning, just as I knew it would. It did not arrive as one big storm. Russell was too careful for that. It came in small weather, a text from Sabrina saying I was destroying Mom, a voicemail from Celeste with more breathing than words, a message from an old church friend asking if everything was okay because she had heard I was confused about the inn. That was Russell's gift. He never needed to call a person a liar when he could make them sound unstable first. By noon, Lenora's phone had started ringing too. She let it ring while she watered the tired plant by the window. "People who ignored me for 10 years suddenly remember my number," she said. "Must be a miracle." I tried to smile, but my stomach had gone tight. I had spent my whole life trying not to be misunderstood, and now Russell was building a whole town out of misunderstanding. Lenora saw it on my face and shook her head. "Do not chase every mouth," she said. "Let him talk. Talking is what men do when the paper is bad." Jude called that afternoon with the next piece. He had pulled the business filings for Sabrina's event company. Private Coastal Events by Sabrina Hayes had been registered 18 months earlier, using the inn's address. Russell was listed as manager on the first filing, then quietly removed from the public version 2 months later. Jude's voice stayed even, but I heard the weight under it. "They were building the conversion while still telling you the inn was struggling as a traditional guest house," he said. "That matters." I asked how much it mattered. He said, "Enough to keep counting." So we counted. Dean came by after work with a shoebox full of receipts he said he had found in the back of his truck, and one folder he had taken from a supply cabinet before Russell changed the locks. He put them on Lenora's table like a man placing evidence of his own weakness in front of a judge. "I should have said something sooner," he said. I did not disagree. Some truths are not helped by kindness. But I told him he was saying it now, and for the first time since I had known him, Dean looked like the sentence gave him a spine. The receipts told a simple story with ugly handwriting. Lighting for the ceremony lawn, imported tile for the bridal bath, Custom signs, deposit for a photographer wall. None of it looked like survival. None of it looked like medicine. One invoice had a date that matched a transfer I sent after Russell told me my mother's new treatment would be delayed without payment. I remembered that week clearly because I had sold my winter coat online and walked to work in 2 sweaters until payday. The invoice was for champagne-colored curtains in Sabrina's consultation room. That was the moment I almost broke my own rule. I picked up my phone and opened Russell's number. My thumb hovered there, ready to call, ready to give him the noise he deserved. Lenora reached across the table and took the phone from my hand without asking. "No," she said. "Do not hand him your pain and let him shape it into proof against you." I hated how right she was. Rage would have felt clean for 5 minutes. Then Russell would have had a voicemail, a witness, a story. The unstable daughter, the jealous sister, the woman who could not let the family succeed. So I went outside instead. The air smelled like salt and wet leaves. Down the hill, the harbor moved under a low gray sky. I walked until the road bent toward the water and the top of the salt lantern came into view. The brass lamp in the cupola caught a weak strip of afternoon light. It did not shine. It simply held the light long enough for me to notice. I stood there breathing through my anger, not forgiving it, not feeding it, just letting it become something I could use. My grandmother had not left me a weapon. She had left me a responsibility. That evening, Celeste came to Lenora's house. She arrived alone, which surprised me until I saw her hands. They were shaking around the strap of her purse. Lenora let her in but did not offer tea. Some family moments do not deserve ceremony. My mother looked smaller than she had 2 nights before, wrapped in a beige coat, her hair pinned neatly like order could still save her. She looked at the papers on the table, and then at me. "Veyra, honey," she said, and the old reflex moved in me before I could stop it. Honey meant comfort. Honey meant guilt. Honey meant she needed something. She did not say she was sorry. She said things had gotten complicated. She said Russell had handled the finances because she was tired. She said Sabrina had only wanted to make the end successful. She said nobody meant to hurt me. Each sentence landed softer than the last, and each one carried the same hard center. Please understand us. Please do not make us name what we did. I asked her whether she knew my money was being used for Sabrina's event rooms. She looked down. That was her answer before her mouth found one. "Not at first," she said. Not at first. 3 small words, and they opened a room I had not wanted to enter. I asked when first ended. Celeste pressed her lips together. Lenora looked toward the window, giving my mother one last chance to choose the truth without being dragged to it. Finally, Celeste said, "Russell said it was still for the inn. He said the event business would save everything. He said you would understand because you always understood." I almost laughed then, but it would have sounded too much like crying. "I understood because you trained me to," I said. My mother flinched. I do not think anyone had ever put it that plainly in front of her. She reached for my hand, but I moved mine before she could touch it, not because I hated her, because I knew what would happen if I let her hold me. I would become useful again. I would soften. I would hear the fear in her voice and forget the years in my own. "Did you know about the will?" I asked. Her face changed completely. Not guilt this time. Fear. Real fear. "Pearl made things difficult," she whispered. That was enough. I stood from the table because sitting down suddenly felt like agreeing to be managed. "No," I said. "Grandma made things clear. Russell made them difficult. You helped him by staying quiet." Celeste began to cry then. The quiet kind that had once emptied my bank account from 3 states away. I felt sorry for her. I did. But pity is not the same as permission. She said Russell was under pressure, that the developer money could fix everything, that maybe selling was the cleanest answer. There it was, finally. Not a mother visiting a daughter, a messenger carrying Russell's newest offer in a softer voice. Lenora opened the front door before I had to answer. "Celeste, go home," she said. My mother looked at me, waiting for me to rescue her from that embarrassment. I did not. She left with her purse clutched to her chest and her tears still wet on her face. I watched her walk to the car and understood something that hurt more than Russell's anger. My mother had not been fooled for 9 years, not fully. At some point, she had simply chosen the version of the truth that asked the least from her. The next day, Russell made his first public move. A post appeared on the inn's social media page, written in Sabrina's bright style, but carrying Russell's fingerprints under every word. It said the Salt Lantern family was heartbroken by recent private conflict. It said the inn remained committed to honoring Pearl Hollis's legacy. It said some people return after years away and misunderstand the sacrifices made by those who stayed. No names, no direct accusation, just enough poison to make people lean closer. Dean saw it before I did and drove straight to Lenora's. He was pale with anger. "They're making it sound like you abandoned them," he said. I looked at the post, at the old photo of my grandmother they had placed under the words, and for one sharp second I wanted to throw the phone across the room. Then I remembered the lamp, holding light, not throwing fire. I told Dean to screenshot everything. Jude told us the same thing 10 minutes later. "Do not respond emotionally," he said. "Respond with records when the time is right." That became our work. Screenshots, bank statements, insurance letters, business filings, contractor receipts, voicemails, texts. Dean wrote down what he remembered and signed the first statement with a hand that shook through his own name. Lenora wrote hers without a tremor. Mine took the longest. Not because I did not know what happened, but because putting 9 years into clean sentences felt like folding a storm into a drawer. By the end of the week, the folder had become 3 folders: money, property, witnesses. Jude kept copies at his office. Lenora kept copies in the tin box. I kept copies in my car because I no longer trusted any house connected to my family to protect the truth. Russell kept talking. Sabrina kept posting. Celeste kept sending messages that began with honey and ended with please. I answered none of them. On Friday night, Jude called and told me the developer had scheduled a private meeting with Russell for the following week. "He may be trying to prove he has family agreement," Jude said, "or create pressure before anyone knows you object." I looked across Lenora's kitchen at the folders, the tin box, the photograph of my grandmother in front of the inn. For the first time, fear was not the largest thing in me. It was still there, but it had company now. Anger, grief, proof, and under all of it, something steadier. I told Jude I wanted to be at that meeting. He was quiet for a moment, then said, "Then we go prepared." After I hung up, I walked outside. The night was cold and clear. Across town, the Salt Lantern sat in darkness, except for one small point of light in the cupola. Someone had turned the brass lamp on, maybe by accident, maybe for show, maybe because the wiring was on a timer. It did not matter. I stood on Lenora's porch and watched it burn above the harbor. Russell thought light was something he could aim at himself when people were watching. My grandmother knew better. Light was what kept ships from crashing into rocks. The developer meeting was held on a Tuesday morning in the back room of the town library, which told me Russell was still pretending this was clean. Men like him loved public buildings. They made private greed look civic. Jude and I arrived 10 minutes early. Lenora came too, wearing her dark coat, and the expression that had ended more arguments than any judge. Dean waited in the parking lot because he said his hands were shaking too badly to sit inside. I told him shaking did not make him useless. It only meant he was finally standing where fear could see him. Russell was already there when we walked in. Sabrina sat beside him with a folder in her lap and a smile too bright for the room. The developer, a man named Carl Brenner, wore a navy suit and the careful patience of someone who had learned that landowners lie differently when money is on the table. My mother was not there. I noticed that first. Celeste had been used for tears, for calls, for guilt, but not for decisions. That told me more than her presence would have. Russell's face changed when he saw Jude. Then it changed again when he saw the folder in my hands. "This is a private family meeting," he said. Jude gave him a polite smile. "Then it should not include a developer." The room went still in that small, satisfying way paper can make a room go still before anyone reads it. Carl Brenner looked from Russell to me. "I was told all family interests had been informed," he said. Russell started to answer, but I spoke first. My voice surprised me by staying calm. They were not. I placed my folder on the table and opened it. My grandmother gave me a protected interest in the Salt Lantern. Any sale, refinance, or major business conversion requires notice and approval under the documents Russell signed after her death. I slid the first copy across the table, not dramatically. Just enough. Sabrina leaned forward. "This is ridiculous," she said. You left for years. You can't just come back and block everything because you're angry. I looked at her and felt almost sorry for how little she understood. She thought anger was the problem because anger was the only thing she could accuse me of without looking at the papers. I'm not blocking it because I'm angry, I said. I'm blocking it because I was hidden from it. Russell laughed then, soft and ugly. Hidden? You were gone, Veyra. You made your choices. That word, choices, landed on the table between us. I thought of Boston. I thought of double shifts. I thought of every transfer sent after a call that began with "Your mother needs you." I looked at Carl Brenner and asked him whether Russell had provided written consent from me. The developer's face tightened. "No," he said. "I was told it was unnecessary." Jude wrote that down. That was the first crack. Not the big one, just enough for everyone to hear it. Russell shifted in his chair and tried to recover. "Veyra is confused about family arrangements," he said. "She has been under stress. We are trying to handle this gently." There it was again. Confused, under stress, gently. A soft net thrown over a woman asking direct questions. Jude did not raise his voice. He simply opened the second folder and placed copies of the management acknowledgments on the table. Russell's signature sat at the bottom of each page, neat and confident, dated years before he started telling me I had no rights. Carl Brenner read them slowly. Sabrina stopped smiling. Russell's jaw moved once, like he had bitten down on a word he could not afford to say. I watched him realize that this was not a family dinner. He could not send me into the rain here. He could not make my mother cry and call that evidence. He could not turn a signature into a misunderstanding while the ink sat in front of strangers. The meeting ended faster than Russell expected. Brenner closed his folder and said he would not move forward until all ownership questions were resolved. He was polite, but not kind. Developers do not like moral problems. They like clean deeds and quiet sellers. Russell had brought him neither. Sabrina stood so quickly, her chair scraped the floor. "You're ruining everything," she said to me. I believed in that moment that she meant it. Not because I was ruining the family, because I was ruining the version of success she had built with my money and called her own. Outside, Dean was waiting near my car. When he saw Russell come out behind us, he stepped back by habit, then stopped himself. It was a small thing, one foot refusing to move farther, but I saw it. Russell saw it too. "You should be careful who you stand beside," he told Dean. Dean swallowed hard. "I am," he said. His voice shook, but the words did not. Russell looked at him like betrayal had a new face. For 3 days after that, Russell stopped smiling in public. Sabrina stopped posting polished little updates and started posting quotes about loyalty. My mother sent one message that said, "Your grandmother would hate this fighting." I stared at it for a long time, then finally typed one answer. "Grandma hated lies." I did not send anything else. The inn opening was already scheduled for the following Saturday, and Sabrina refused to cancel it. I think part of her believed beauty could outrun truth. There would be flowers, local press, a ribbon, donors, vendors, and half the town standing on the lawn clapping for a business built on emergency transfers. Jude advised me not to attend unless I was ready for Russell to perform. Lenora said he would perform whether I was there or not. Dean said very quietly that if I went, he would stand with me, so we prepared. Jude made a clean packet: the will, the acknowledgments, the insurance letters, the transfer list, the contractor invoices, Dean's statement, Lenora's statement, and Russell's voicemail about arrangements. Not every ugly thing, just enough ugly things in the right order. "Truth does not need to be loud," Jude said, handing me the folder. "It needs to be organized." Saturday came clear and cold. The kind of day that made the ocean look expensive. The Salt Lantern lawn was full by noon. White chairs faced the ceremony arch. A ribbon had been tied across the porch steps. Sabrina moved through the crowd in a cream dress, bright and nervous, touching people's arms, laughing too high. Russell stood near the front in a gray suit, greeting town officials like a man receiving guests at his own monument. Celeste stood beside him, pale and silent, wearing the pearl ring turned inward against her palm. I arrived with Lenora on one side and Dean on the other. Jude followed behind us with a second copy of the packet. People turned. Some looked curious, some looked uncomfortable. A few looked away too quickly. That is how gossip looks when it suddenly has to share space with the person it used as entertainment. Sabrina saw me first. Her smile froze. Russell saw me next. For 1 second, his face showed the truth before he covered it. Fear, not of me exactly. Fear of a room he could no longer fully control. The ceremony began anyway. Sabrina gave a speech about legacy, family sacrifice, and honoring Pearl Hollis's dream. I stood near the edge of the porch and listened to my grandmother's name being polished by the people who had buried her wishes. My hand stayed still. The brass lamp in the cupola above us caught the sun, and I looked at it whenever my anger tried to climb. Then Russell took the microphone. He thanked the town. He thanked Sabrina. He thanked my mother. Then his eyes found me, and I knew before he said another word that he had chosen the old weapon because it was the only one he had left. Some of you know there has been private tension in our family, he said. A person who has been away for many years has returned with hurt feelings and misunderstandings. We have tried to handle it with grace. He paused, letting the crowd lean in. But I will not allow bitterness to destroy what Sabrina and this family have built. There it was, not my name, but my shape. Away, hurt, misunderstanding, bitterness. He was building the cage in public, one careful bar at a time. I stepped forward before Jude could ask if I was sure. I was sure, not because I was fearless. I was afraid in every place a person can be afraid. But fear is not always a stop sign. Sometimes it is only proof that you have reached the door. Russell, I said, and my voice carried farther than I expected. He turned toward me with the microphone still in his hand. The crowd went quiet. Even the sea seemed to pull back from the rocks. He smiled. Veyra, this is not the place. I walked up the porch steps slowly and set my folder on the small table beside the ribbon. I agree, I said. This was never the place for lies. Sabrina whispered my name like a warning. My mother closed her eyes. Russell's smile thinned. You are embarrassing yourself, he said softly, forgetting the microphone was still close enough to catch it. No, I said. For 9 years, I embarrassed myself by believing people who spent my love and called it duty. The crowd did not move. Jude came to stand at the bottom of the steps. Lenora stood near the first row with her chin lifted. Dean stayed beside her, pale but upright. I opened the folder. Not fast, not with drama, just one page at a time. The will, the signed acknowledgments, the insurance letters, the transfer list, the invoices for Sabrina's bridal suite and event lawn, dated after my emergency payments. I did not read every word. I did not need to. I only explained what each paper was, and who had signed it, and why it mattered. Russell tried to interrupt once. Jude stopped him with one sentence. Let her finish, or I will read the legal notice myself. That was the first time I saw people look at Jude instead of Russell. It was a small shift, but power often leaves quietly before the room notices. I looked at Sabrina last. You said I made normal family help sound like a crime, I said. Maybe helping family is normal, but hiding a will is not. Using medical fear to ask for money is not. Telling a daughter the inn is dying while building a private event business in her name's shadow is not. Sabrina's face had gone white. For once, she had no pretty sentence ready. Then I turned to Russell, the man who had told me I could not stay, the man who had made himself the door to every room in my family. You told people I came back confused, I said. I did come back confused. I was confused because I thought I had been saving my family. Now I know I was funding the life you built while keeping me outside of it. Russell looked around the lawn, searching for one friendly face, one person ready to believe him over paper. He found none quickly enough to save himself. I picked up the ribbon scissors from the table and placed them back down, untouched. I am not here to destroy the salt lantern, I said. I am here to stop it from being sold, hidden, or renamed by people who forgot what Pearl Hollis left it for. Above us, the brass lamp caught the sunlight again. This time, it did not look small. It looked like a witness. For a long moment after I finished speaking, nobody moved. The lawn stayed silent in that strange way crowds go quiet when they realize the story they came to watch has turned into evidence. Russell stood beside the ribbon with the microphone in his hand. But for the first time since I had known him, he had no room left to perform. His face moved through anger, disbelief, and calculation, searching for a door that was not there. Sabrina looked at the papers on the table as if they belonged to someone else's life. Maybe, in a way, they did. She had grown up inside Russell's version of the truth, where my money was family money, my silence was agreement, and her comfort was proof that everything had worked out. Now the truth was sitting in public, with dates and signatures, and it did not care how beautiful the flowers looked. Russell tried one last time. He said I was twisting things, that I did not understand what it took to keep a business alive, that my grandmother would be ashamed of me for turning family matters into public drama. His voice was louder than mine, but loud is not the same as strong. Jude stepped forward and told the crowd calmly that the sale talks were suspended, the property rights were under review, and any future business action involving the Salt Lantern would require proper notice and legal approval. He did not make a speech. He did not need to. Paper had already done the speaking. Then Aunt Lenora walked up the porch steps. She moved slowly, but nobody mistook that for weakness. She placed my grandmother's letter on top of the folder and said, Pearl knew exactly what she wanted. She wanted this place protected from hungry people. She looked at Russell when she said hungry, and he looked away first. That was the closest thing to victory I had ever seen from him. My mother started crying before she reached me. Celeste came forward with both hands pressed to her chest, whispering my name like it was still something she could use to pull me back. Veyra, honey, please, she said. This has gone too far. I looked at her, and I felt the old pull. The child in me still wanted a mother who would choose me without being cornered. But the woman in me had learned the cost of waiting for that. No, I said softly. It went too far 9 years ago. Today, it finally stopped. She had no answer for that. Maybe there was none. The ribbon was not cut that afternoon. The photographer from the local paper lowered his camera and then raised it again. But this time, he was not taking pictures of Sabrina's flowers. He was taking pictures of the folder, the old letter, the lamp above the porch, and Russell Vale walking across the lawn with no one following him. He did not apologize. Men like him rarely do when the room is still full. He simply left because leaving was the only control he had left. Sabrina stayed behind. For a while she stood near the ceremony arch, staring at the sea. When she finally came to me, she looked younger than her dress, younger than her diamond, younger than all the confidence she had borrowed from Russell. I didn't know all of it, she said. I believed her. I also knew that not knowing all of it did not mean knowing none of it. I told her the inn would not be discussed that day. If she wanted to speak as my sister someday, the door was not locked. But the business, the money, and the lies were no longer family secrets. They were facts. The legal cleanup took months, not dramatic months, real months. Forms, meetings, signatures, account reviews, quiet arguments through attorneys, and long afternoons where nothing seemed to move except the tide. The sale died first. Then Sabrina's event company was removed from the inn's public branding until proper ownership and management could be settled. Russell fought in small ways, then stopped when Jude sent a packet thick enough to make even his lawyer tired. In the end, he did what cowards often do when truth becomes expensive. He disappeared from the fight and called it dignity. I did not get the money back. I need to say that plainly. People like clean endings, where the stolen dollars return, where the guilty pay, where every wound is balanced on a neat little scale. Real life is not that obedient. The money had become walls, curtains, debt payments, flower arches, and years I could not repossess. But I kept the next year, and then the one after that. Sometimes that is the only justice you can reach. Dean stayed. He worked at the inn with a quiet seriousness that made guests trust him before he finished a sentence. Aunt Lenora took over the front desk twice a week and frightened rude customers into becoming polite. Jude remained our attorney, though over time he became the person who came by after closing with takeout, and stayed to fix the loose hinge on the pantry door. I will not dress that up too much. Some good things do not need to be rushed into names. As for Celeste, she sent me a letter before Christmas. 3 pages, careful and soft, full of almost apologies. She wrote that she had been scared. She wrote that Russell made things hard. She wrote that she always knew I was strong enough to survive. I read that line twice and then folded the letter back into its envelope. For most of my life, strong had meant I would get less and be praised for needing nothing. I was done being loved that way. On the first night we reopened the Salt Lantern properly, not as Sabrina's private dream, not as Russell's hidden sail, but as the place Pearl Hollis had meant it to be. I climbed the stairs to the cupola and lit the brass lamp myself. The harbor was dark. The foghorn sounded once from far out on the water. Below me, guests laughed in the dining room. Dean carried coffee to table 3. Lenora argued with the reservation book, and Jude stood on the porch looking up at the light. I thought about the night Russell told me I had no right to come home. I thought about the rain, the suitcases, the $73, and the tin box with my name on it. I had believed I was homeless that night. I was wrong. I had simply been standing outside the wrong door. Family is not always the people who share your blood. Sometimes family is the aunt who opens the door in the rain, the cousin who finally tells the truth with shaking hands, the old letter that waits until you are ready, and the quiet people who stand beside you when lies get loud. That is what the salt lantern taught me. A house can be stolen for a while. A name can be buried for years. A life can be used until the person living it forgets she owns anything at all. But light, real light, has a stubborn memory. And sooner or later, it finds the window.